Now, there's a new study published in the journal Pediatrics that said that arguing with people who are anti-vaccination is pretty much 100% useless. Now, this was a study done by political scientist Brendan Nyhan of Dartmouth College and 3 of his colleagues. Now, these authors actually also did a previous study that they're known for that showed that when conservatives read a fake newspaper article containing a quote from George W. Bush asserting that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, followed by a factual correction stating that no, Iraq did not have WMDs, Bush did not say that, they believed Bush's falsehood more strongly after the fact. After being presented with actual facts, they believed in the lie more strongly. An outcome that Nyhan and Reifler dubbed a backfire effect. Now, how does this relate to the story? Well, we'll get into that. But the study tested the effectiveness of 4 pro-vaccine messages. Their results, not less than encouraging. Not a single one of those messages was successful in increasing parents' intent to vaccinate their kids. And in some cases, those messages actually made people less likely to vaccinate their kids. The complete backfire effect. Now, recent research suggests that a conspiratorial, paranoid mindset prevails around some people who are anti-vaccination. Now, that research published in the journal PLOS ONE found links between conspiratorial thinking between not only vaccines but also climate change and GMOs. So if you don't believe in climate change and if you believe GMOs are completely harmful, you are also more likely to believe that vaccines cause autism and are generally harmful for your children. Now, vaccines actually scored the highest in this study in PLOS ONE. The study says that people who tend toward conspiratorial thinking are actually 3 times more likely to reject vaccinations compared to those sample people questioned about GMOs and climate change. So anti-vaxxer is a lot higher up in the not believe scale. So what are those? What were those 4 pro-vaccine messages anyway that were used? Well, one was called autism correction. Mother Jones explains it as a factual science-heavy correction of false claims that the MMR vaccine causes autism, assuring parents that the vaccine is both safe and effective. Citing multiple studies that disprove claims of an autism link. Now, the second message was called disease risks, and it simply listed all the many risks of contracting measles, mumps, rubella, describing the complications that can come with these diseases. The third message, according to Mother Jones, is dubbed disease narrative, and it actually told a true anecdotal story about a 10-month-old who had a temperature basically go to about 106 after he contracted measles from another child in a pediatrician's waiting room. Now, the final message was basically disease images, where they showed images of children with measles, mumps, and rubella. Now, the results showed that the least successful messages were disease narrative and disease images. So that personal story and showing images of children worked the least. Hearing the narrative actually increased respondents' likelihood of thinking that getting the MMR vaccine will cause serious side effects. And that went from 7.7% to 13.8%. So it nearly doubled. Similarly, looking at the images, increased test subjects' belief that the vaccines cause autism. And like I said, both of those messages completely backfired. Now, as far as autism correction, according to the study, it actually worked as a whole somewhat to reduce the belief that in the falsehood that vaccines cause autism. But there was also a bad effect of that. Apparently, it also decreased the percent of parents saying that they would vaccinate their kids. So even though they know that, okay, so we're reassured that this vaccine doesn't cause autism, but we're not going to vaccinate our kids anyway. In fact, we're less likely to vaccinate our kids. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. Go ahead, Stephen.
Oh.
No,
we'll get to you,
ahead.
Sean.
Okay,
I was
I'll
gonna
go then.
say I was gonna say the MMR study makes the most sense out of any of them to me because if you read an article in a newspaper that said, "Oh, study shows that random product cocaine doesn't have AIDS in it despite concerns," then you're gonna be like, "Oh, there was some people who thought Coca-Cola had AIDS in it," and then they're gonna like shy more away from it. So if you're like if you set up a story like that or a message like that, I could see how that could turn people in the other direction. But the disease images, I knew that didn't work because I've seen that idea floated around with smoking cigarettes and nobody cares. And the autism correction, it seemed because it's more broad on vaccines and it's not, really um, like specific, so I could see how that could be like more palatable to somebody who's anti-vaccine, but like all these kind of make sense, and there has to be a fifth or sixth way to send this message to people, and like somehow.
Well, that was one of the problems with this study that they had actually said. It's like, look, we tried these 4 different ways, and none of them worked. Maybe there are other things that we can try. We just haven't tried them yet. But the things that we did try did not work whatsoever.
Yeah, well, I mean, like here in the UK, back in I think it was in 1998, there was a doctor called it was Andrew Wakefield who published a paper in the Lancet, a respected medical journal and stuff, that made this link between the MMR vaccine and autism, and it got a huge amount of press, and mothers started like stopping their kids getting the MMR vaccine because in the UK, in the NHS, everyone can get the MMR vaccine, completely free should they so wish. They're not forced to, but they can get it, and thousands of women or mothers stopped their kids getting the MMR vaccine, which led to an increase in the outbreak of those diseases. And then it was, there was an investigation done into the paper, and it turns out that this Dr. Wakefield had a whole kind of number of conflicts of interest. He'd manipulated evidence. He'd done a whole ton of things, and the paper was, I think, it was partly retracted in 2004, and then fully retracted in 2010, basically saying this paper is completely false. But it took during that time, kind of a lot of people said, "Oh, I'm not sure whether it's," even when the paper was partially retracted, saying, "Oh, well, just in case, I won't, give my kid the MMR vaccine," even though all the other medical doctors, everyone else is saying, "No, it's perfectly fine." And it's once you kind of lodge that seed of doubt into someone's head, they they don't want to take anything as an absolute, so they just want to be absolutely sure, and so they just won't use it. And I think there's a case of kind of, is it is it worth arguing with these people? Like in the UK, when this paper was shown to be an absolute lie and stuff, medical professionals came out and said, "Look, it's still worth getting the vaccine. There's no risk to your child whatsoever," and that did sway a lot of people back. But there are going to be this minority of people. I do think it is a minority of the population that are going to be conspiratorial and anxious and paranoid about absolutely everything. And even if you give them kind of the correct facts, as you're saying, kind of you can give them the correct facts and they'll still shun those facts because, like for me, I think it's a case of kind of they're insecure about their own intelligence and they don't want to be proven wrong. I think deep down they probably know that they're a bit stupid and they don't want that to be proven, and they don't want other people to know that they're stupid, so they'll just shut off all the facts and just stick to their own and live in their own reality. But when it comes to it, I still think you've got to try and make the effort to argue with these people. Otherwise, I mean, there comes a point where you just got to say, okay, fine, but you've got to at least try.
Well, and like we see this in a lot of other stories, like where people will hear a rumor and then they'll panic. Like one of the stories that comes to mind is the pink slime story, which if those of you who don't know, pink slime was actually invented. Well, it's an invented term, but the process that produces it was actually invented by a meat company trying to be more environmentally conscious, and basically it saved 5,000 cows a day just using that process to get the remainder of the meat. And they gave that story to the film company that made Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, without knowing that that was also the film company that made Food Inc. And then it got turned into Pink Slime, and then people flipped out, and then they're like, Pink Slime's in McDonald's, it's in our children's food. And it turns out that Pink Slime isn't really that much more dangerous than our normal beef. It's pretty shitty. And like it's just
literally
like,
shitty. Cause...
But I'm saying it's literally, but it's not. It wasn't anything like compared to our normal beef. There was nothing terrible about it. Like more terrible than like the normal process. So it's like to me, like I got it. Once you get bad journalists or bad study or bad something, then you know it's pretty much over for that vaccine, and you might have to rename it. And to get to the point about the conspiratorial nature of vaccine deniers or I hate the word deniers, or people who are anti-vaccine. Yeah, that's definitely there because it's the government. They're recommending them. You have to get them to go to the schools and all that. But they're not helped by the fact that people have used vaccines, or the federal government brags about using vaccines in the Bin Laden case to take people's DNA to figure out where Bin Laden is. So people over here use that and they say, look, if they misrepresented the purpose, if the CIA misrepresented the purpose of the vaccine program in Pakistan, then they could have done so in New York or DC or Alabama or wherever. So like the government doesn't help their case on this, and like I can see why people who are conspiratorial, this would be among their top like beliefs. So like it's just one of those situations where you just got to keep figuring out new ways to give them the message that these are probably perfectly fine. Like I'm 99.9% sure your kid's not gonna, something bad's not gonna happen to him. Yeah, although I mean, he might be allergic, which is possible.
Yeah, I mean I think it's also it's down to like it's the responsibility of the kind of the media just in general, and one can even say people on Twitter as well. That recently in the UK there's been this ongoing kind of scandal at the BBC where there's been a whole ton of like paedophiles unearthed in the BBC, kind of old radio DJs and TV presenters and stuff. And there was recently a case of an actor, a guy called Bill Roach, who was accused. There's been about 20 odd people who've been arrested in connection, and I think it's called Operation U-Tree. And there was a whole ton of accusations made against him. He's a big kind of soap actor on Coronation Street, I think it is, saying, oh, he abused these kids. And it recently went to court and he was proven completely innocent, But the fact that kind of it been alleged that he was this person, kind of it got into people's minds, and that's going to stick with them now. That image is going to stick with him for the rest of his life. And I think it's the same with vaccines. This initial story can come out saying it's going to, cause disabilities for your kid if you give it. People can come out, all the scientists in the world can come out and say, no, it doesn't. This study is absolutely wrong. That initial accusation is false. But there's still going to be something at the back of their mind. And I think it's a responsibility of the media that when these sort of situations occur, especially, I mean, I don't really kind of care for Bill Roach as an actor anyway, but especially when it's of issues of importance such as vaccination, that when a study is disproven, that is, if the lie is allowed to perpetuate, that the media has to come out, and people who care about this issue come out strongly straight away and not have a protracted kind of, well, people are saying that actually no, it's fine, and come out weak-willed. You've got to come out strong and just say no, completely false, and just have a media blitz. 2 weeks, that might even be a bit too much, but just a week. If that's all the news talks about and that's all the newspapers cover, saying no, it's completely wrong, it's false, and everything's safe, you don't need to worry about it, that would solve it. There'd still be a small minority that's going to stick to it, but if that happened, I don't think it would be as big an issue. But the media's not going to do that because that's not going to make them profit.
Right. And the media shouldn't present the woman that Jim Carrey is banging as an expert.
Or
that
Jenny
would
McCarthy.
Help too.
Yeah.
Or Jenny McCarthy, who is a well-known.
That was the woman. That was the woman Jim Carrey was banging.
Apparently, I have no idea who Jim Carrey is banging. So, forgive me on that one. I don't keep track of who's having sex with who. But no, Jenny McCarthy is not. I mean, if you want to get after somebody about not having any sort of scientific credibility, that's one person to go after. You know, not people who are actually reporting what other people are reporting, because that's what we're doing here. We're reporting what someone else is reporting, which is kind of funny, but we're also discussing it. That sort of gives us sort of a little bit of leeway, I think.
Yeah, it's informed debate rather than just anecdotal evidence from one celebrity who slept with another celebrity.
Right. So we should get to some matters of disagreement. So what do you guys think the solution to this problem is of people not vaccinating? Jeff thinks that the government should stick a needle in your face without you having any say in the matter.
Only in your face.
I disagree.
Only in your face.
No.
Okay, so my stance on this is that this is a public health issue. And I think a lot of these loopholes should be closed. If you want to be part of society, you need to protect the rest of society from these diseases that are only protected, that protect the people who can't get these through, you know, because there are a selection of people who have bad reactions to vaccines who cannot get vaccinated. Those are the people that need to be protected in that herd immunity. And closing these loopholes would actually protect these people using that herd immunity. Sean, I know you disagree. Tell me
why. I think it's an individual responsibility type of thing. I don't care about herd immunity. And if you're unfortunate enough to be a person who's allergic to vaccines, then that's really goes in the sad day for you category. Like it just doesn't seem right for the government to force a needle in your arm. Like they can recommend them, they could promote them, they could do all those things, but like all in all, it's still up to the parent or the person when they're old enough to make the decision for themselves. And I don't think it should be a government issue. So leave the personal loophole open.
Stephen.
Well, like this is one of the issues that I have with the American healthcare system, is that in the UK here, I was saying about kind of the MMR vaccine, the NHS and therefore the government kind of pays for it. You can get it completely for free, and it's your choice. But the fact that it's free and the government comes out with campaigns saying yes, it's good for your child, it's going to make them healthy, then people saying it's free, it's probably going to make me healthy and protect me from disease and pain and suffering later on. So I'll go for it. Whereas in America, because you've got to pay insurance for all these extra things, people are thinking, well, they're less likely to take it because you've got the cost barrier for their minds to break through, and then they've got this paranoia about the worries about vaccination to break through as well. They've got two mental barriers. Whereas in the UK, it's just a case of, it's just that that slight worry, and I don't think it's as bad in the UK potentially as it is out in America, because we had this MMR controversy that was back in '98. It was a huge media story that went on and still being covered back when the paper was retracted in 2010. And because there was so much media around it, people were made aware of the facts. So I think I'm on Sean's side in that you can't force people, certainly in regards to the MMR vaccine, and if there's a vaccine for dengue fever and stuff like that, the government can't give you a vaccine for actually everything and force you to have it. But if there was a SARS outbreak or a swine flu outbreak that was killing millions and millions of people across the world, and the vaccine was cheap, then I think the government does have a right to step in and protect its citizens. Like in that case,
agree to disagree.
And Sean, I want to point out how actually kind of ridiculous the imaging around your argument really is, because this isn't literally the government breaking down your door and jamming a needle into your kid's arm, okay?
Into his face.
This is that's the issue, and I think this ties right into the conspiracy sort of argument, the conspiratorial part, because that's exactly the image that people who are, oh my God, the black helicopters and all that sort of stuff are going to see. Those UN jackbooted thugs are going to break into my house and jam a needle into my son's face in order to give him autism. by saying stuff like that, Sean, you're perpetuating that conspiratorial bullshit. This is simply a public health issue. And I think in order to protect everybody, because you can't have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness if you're not alive, if you die from polio, which we eliminated for a long time.
Yeah.
Drop the mic.
So I disagree with that. And I've never understood why black helicopters are some kind of sign of conspiracy theorists. Of course there are black helicopters. Black Hawk Down, never heard of it. Like I never got that part, so I'm just gonna throw that out there. But yeah, I don't think that the government can force you to do so. And I think honestly, like first of all, a lot of vaccines in the US are like really cheap, or you can get them at certain schools. Like Rick Perry actually got in trouble for that, giving out the Gardasil vaccine. But like people get more paranoid in this country when the government tries to give you something for free, like a shot or something like that. Like
that's because of Ronald Reagan and his what is it? Those words that you never want to hear. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. That's exactly the kind of paranoid fear-mongering that comes from the extreme right that makes people fucking paranoid. And then
they should be paranoid when the government says that.
Look, the thing about the right wing is that they tend to do those self-fulfilling prophecies that Stephen loves, Stephen has pointed out a couple of times, is that they come in and they say, well, obviously government doesn't work. And then they fucking break it.
Well, I mean,
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Nonsense.
Okay,
Republicans doubled the education budget. Like Republicans have been trying to make government work. Like they don't cut anything. Stop lying.
But okay. Let's take another kind of hypothetical in that you're saying, Sean, that if there was a disease outbreak, the government doesn't have the right to go.
I actually wanted to address that. I actually want to address that straight up because you brought up swine flu. And it turns out more people die from the swine flu vaccine because a certain percentage of people who get the flu shot actually develop the flu, right? So more people actually die who got vaccinated than people who had the flu just normally. So that's my thing with flu shots, and I put them in a different category because
I also put flu shots in a different category than things like polio and MMR, because the flu isn't necessarily a deadly disease. That has no cure.
But I put MMR in a completely different category because I don't even know what that means.
Measles, mumps, and rubella.
Mumps, measles, and rubella.
Yeah.
That.
Okay, but right. So my other hypothetical is that Sean, you don't want if there's disease, the government doesn't have the right to come, and stick and inject everyone with the vaccine. It's people's choice if they want to be saved from this deadly virus. If back in the olden times, back in the Dark Age, if there was an outbreak of leprosy, the governments would step in and create leprosy colonies and fence those people off to stop the disease from spreading. If such a case were to occur, would you be in favour of the government doing that? Because do you want to get leprosy or some equivalent? Because that's sort of the same thing, and the government there, I'd say, does have the right to step in and wall off these people, because otherwise it's going to create even more suffering.
Are you saying you're in favor of walling off undesirable people into their own separate camps?
I'm saying if there was a disease that's contagious and causes your limbs to fall off and stuff. I'm not talking about Mein Kampf sort of stuff here. No.
I just wanted to say that, but yeah, you could wall yourself off away from people who are sick or whatever. And I get it, if you're like crazy contagious, like something like that, like that's a little different from not getting a vaccine. Like a vaccine protects you from an illness that you might get. Like if you're somebody who's actually sick and like zombie biting people, then like I don't want you. I want you somewhere safe and not exploding. Like I guess a better example would be if there was if there was ever a bioterrorism attack, like in a mall or something, then they would probably quarantine the mall, right, to keep the pathogen in. Yeah, I've been watching 24 lately, but Yeah, like so that makes sense, but that's like an obvious like it's right there danger. Like not getting vaccinated, you might get sick. You see the difference, in my opinion.
So you're saying that we shouldn't be afraid of potential futures, like we shouldn't kind of worry about things,
I mean,
that could happen.
you can't force people to prepare. Like the power might go out in a hurricane, and you might need 4 days worth of food, but the government can't force you to go have 4 days worth of storable food in your house.
Yeah, but that's also not a public health issue.
It's a public power issue, man. Hurricane Sandy, it was really terrible.
Okay, so if people kind of can't be forced to prepare, for any, potential futures, no matter how unlikely or likely they are, does that mean that you don't think the government should force people through legislation and stuff to try and counteract climate change then? Like, do you think they should just say, well, we don't know it's going to happen? No, we kind of do, but we can't predict the future 100%, so therefore let's not worry about it at all. Let's leave it to the individuals.
Well, I mean, I think that the legislation that's proposed, it's actually when they actually do research on the proposals that they have, they actually don't address the problem at all, and it's really kind of like a scam, like cap and trade. So actually, I would prefer if they didn't do things like that.
Cap and trade was a conservative idea.
Which is probably why it's a scam. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
okay, fair enough.
But seriously, there are studies that say that like if you have this thing, you'll have a whole bunch of weird taxes, but you won't reduce carbon and you won't like change global warming. Like, so I don't want them to do. I don't want them to do dumb things. Like if the government said, "Hey, here's an idea that nobody would be against. Why don't we invest in why don't we promote like a carbon scrubber, like something that will scrub carbon out of the atmosphere?" Right? Like that would seem like a pretty fucking smart idea, considering you have the Chinese and the Indians never gonna stop pumping coal into the atmosphere.
And Americans, but yeah.
Right, and Americans. But I'm saying even if the Americans did, like, you would just make coal cheaper for the Indians and the Chinese, and they're the growing economies in the world.
So you're saying we should only kind of try and kind of prepare and defend ourselves?
No, but I'm saying like you could do things that make sense, is what I'm saying. But
surely the vaccines make sense though.
Yeah, but I'm talking about makes sense, but makes sense. But the vaccines violate people's personal individual freedom, and you can't do things that would shit on them.
Yes, you are infringing on my personal freedom to not get polio.
Yes, that is your personal. If you are paranoid about the polio vaccine for whatever reason, then you should not have to take it. And if you roll around at FDR's grave and get polio, like that's on you.
Okay, so if you roll around and do get polio, that's fine. But then if you give it to somebody else who can't get a vaccine, that's the issue here.
Yeah, you're talking about this low percentage person who can't get a vaccine but wants a vaccine that for some reason their rights supersede your rights. That's not how it works. Like, you have a right to decide what goes into your own body.
And you also have a right to not have the jackass next to you give you a potentially fatal disease.
All right, well, if you weren't allergic
to your own stupid inaction.
Surely the solution to this is, like, okay, there's going to be a certain percent of people that don't want anything to do with vaccines, don't want to know about the government, even though the highways and so on and so forth. But surely the solution would be if the government just subsidized the hell out of MMR vaccines, polio vaccines, so they cost a person $1 to get vaccinated. They could just turn up at their local clinic, and just pay $1 and get vaccinated, and then that means it reduces that cost barrier. Surely that would just solve all of these problems. If you had a national health service, none of this would really be an issue.
But Stephen, that's communism.
But no, vaccines aren't actually. Once a vaccine is on the recommended list, like that list that you're like, it's done by states here, but once it's on that list that your state recommends that you get, the vaccine is cheaper, and I'm pretty sure there is some subsidy involved, and you can get it at a pretty low cost. There's just a lot of people who don't want them, but it is like I think you could get like a flu shot, and I know it's a different category, but you can get like a flu shot for like $10 at certain like pharmacies around here,
All right, Sean,
But
I'm gonna have to cut you off there.
I'm just saying it's not always a cost issue.
Right. So I mean, I'd be open to trying Steven's idea of getting subsidized and having it cheap and having education campaigns. Since this study does show that at least telling people about, hey, there's a bunch of scientific research that says that this is actually okay, so you don't have to worry about an autism link or anything like that. That actually worked in dispelling that notion.
Yeah,
So I mean, that's a place to start.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip, make sure to like and leave a comment below, or even share. Sharing is caring. If you want to see more TYT Nation videos, go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TYT Nation. Thank you for watching.